And there's
Okay.
people, so there we go.
Yeah, here we are. Thank you.
And then hit,
Ah,
you can just keep hitting them at all, it should.
how about that?
About are we seeing otter? There you
Oh,
go.
there you go, approve that.
There we go. Did you see otter? Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
water just came through.
Probably wanna see if they can hear you.
I'm sorry.
Do you wanna see if they can hear you?
Yes, we should have a confirmation. We can be heard. Will, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And it's recording, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I heard it say
Yeah.
that. Okay, so the first item that's on the agenda is the public comment and review of proposal from the Plainfield Planning Commission for revisions of the Plainfield zoning regulations for inclusion in town meeting Australian ballot. So we have to get this figured out tonight, and there was a recommendation. We accept it as it is, knowing that the select board can make changes later, but we can talk about specific issues, and Will's here, so we can ask him questions if we have them. Do you have a question? Yeah.
My name's Lena. And,
Could we just have a second?
yeah,
This is the public hearing as opposed to the. Yes. select board meeting. Yeah. So this is.
We all got the mic.
Yeah.
I just want to explain, just for anyone who might not be clear, that we have a public hearing on this particular item. The rest of it is going to be select board meeting, which is open to the public, but it's not going to be a dialogue as much as it is with a public hearing. But, yeah, ask your question, please.
for the planning commission.
Yes.
Zoning.
Yes, please.
Not really want to talk.
I don't think that's
I think you can hear me fine.
did you push the button?
Yeah, should see green, right?
Yeah, then you gotta turn the little slide little thing. The button on the bottom's gotta be green, and then.
It did work because we tested it. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more for the people who aren't in the room.
No, it's not. It's for the people that are in the room, Michael.
Hello. Is that good?
Well,
No, because
Go ahead.
it catches everybody.
Okay, so at the last planning commission meeting, I asked a question about the second area, not the area that, Goddard, that they want to add
Uh-huh.
to the village district, but the other area.
Yep.
Which is all along Redfield Road, up Berry Hill Road to where it splits to Lower and Middle Road.
Yep.
And I had a couple of questions about that, but during the meeting, he said, Will said that that was not being added. And it wasn't until after the meeting that we emailed back and forth, and he realized that it is being added, it is requested to be added. And it was just that it had been on the agenda for so long that he forgot that it was added. So my questions, I'm concerned about them building any more houses on the Redfield Road, because it was wiped out, most of it, and it's only fixed for emergency vehicles really right now.
Okay.
And so I don't really understand what the reasoning would be to add that area to the village district.
Can we have Will answer that?
I think I'm muted now, and
Yes.
I think that's a legitimate concern. There are really only two properties that would be affected, and so I think it would make sense to maybe take those properties out of the village district because of the flood hazard that is so close to them. They are in the river corridor hazard zone, so there's a certain amount of limitation. But if you really zoom in on it, there are some sections that aren't. So we do have a bunch of amendments that we're gonna propose. The scenario is the document that's on the website now is the document that really has to go to town meeting for the Australian ballot. And we have a number of amendments that, due to timing constraints, we weren't able to put into the document that'll be voted on. So I would think the planning commission would certainly look at that. And I think that's a reasonable request that property that, even though some of it is in the river corridor zone, it's accessed by a road that is basically a hazard, and maintaining it will be different, and putting high density housing at the end of that road doesn't make sense. So I would say let's put that under consideration for the amendment.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing that we'll need a more discussion about, and we can do that later. As a select board, we can make those decisions. We don't have to go to a town vote for that. That's my understanding.
Well, yeah, I mean, to put it on an Australian ballot, we kind of have to vote it as is. And then
Yeah.
basically have the voters of the town have faith that the planning commission and the select board can make reasonable adjustments after the fact.
Okay, yep, thank you. So is there any other thoughts here?
And thank you for pointing that out. I think that's a reasonable issue that needs to be resolved.
Okay, good. Because of the time constraints, we're trying to get our town meeting organized and properly warned, and so this is why we're suggesting this. Any other thoughts from the board on how to proceed with this? We want to have a motion, or?
Wait, what?
So where are the actual zoning changes that they want? Are those?
Where
You
are
said
they?
they're on the website now?
Yep,
Yeah,
So
Well, they have been
they've
for a couple-
changed since the last planning commission meeting?
they have not changed.
No.
Well, I think
Can I-
you just said they did.
but can
I
I,
think he said, yeah, that's.
can I try to explain this? So the planning commission sent us these draft zoning document, the draft zoning map, which are both on the website.
Yeah.
Sent to the select board a few weeks ago. And so that is the document that we are putting a hearing on, and that is the documents that we will vote on. Since they've sent that to us, they have gotten more feedback and they've found some places they can fine tune. This Reckfield Road would be one of those. The nature of our state law is the document that they send us, the document that we do this hearing on today, is the document we have to vote on. We can't amend this document before the vote. So what we're trying to do is lay out all of the improvements that people are pointing out. And state law now allows us to, as a select board, vote in zoning changes. We could have voted this whole package in, but we wanted it to go to the voters. So what we're gonna do is vote on this package on March 4th, or leading up to March 4th. And then if there are changes and amendments, planning commission will start working on those recommendations through their process, bring them to the select board. The select board, they can then pass them, if that makes sense. So anything you see is great to mention because we can still improve the document. The good news is we have the flexibility to change zoning laws whenever appropriate now without having a full vote, because the state legislature has changed the law on that last year.
Yes,
That is not what Will said at the planning commission public hearing. He said any questions that you had could be brought to the select board at this meeting for public comment, and you could make the changes before it gets voted on. Correct, Will?
That's what I said, but it's not correct. Because because I learned subsequently that the amendment process is more complicated than I had understood. So it was, you were correct in what what I said, but what I said was not correct. And I apologize for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when we've consulted with the League of Cities and Towns, and we have something in our town charter. It's not just the state law, but our town charter requires that if we were to vote amendments, we would then have to hold another public hearing before taking it to the town for a vote. Okay, that's what our charter says. And so in consultation with the League of Cities and Towns, we said, there's so much in here that the commission has worked on, the river corridor stuff, the expansion of bringing Goddard into the village, et cetera, that is worth going ahead with. That 95% of the document is what we really want to end up with. They have a list of, I think it was 9 amendments, maybe 10 here with the, that could go on there. They're not major per se. And you know, those are things that we can, as a select board, then we would have to hold a public hearing. But we could then vote without having to go through the whole Australian ballot warning to the town just on those amendments. We could choose to do that, but you're talking about, you know, small percentages of the overall document in our judgment.
Denise has a hand up.
Oh, somebody has their hand up, Denise?
Hi, thanks. So yeah, I realize that the Planning Commission has worked a long time on this document. However, to characterize the changes as small seems a little bit disingenuous to me, considering there's been a great deal of controversy over the question of the 1/10 acre minimum, and that this is one of the things I believe, although I missed the last couple of Planning Commission hearings, is being considered as a change in the amendment. So I feel that there's been, as I've said this over and over again, there's been a great deal of rush to get this last part done, and I understand why. It's in order to get the expansion project going, to get the NDA approved, to enable the expansion project. However, the changes are not just for that area, they're for the whole downtown and for Goddard. And to me, it seems strange to be rushing to get it done by town meeting, for us to vote for something that even the Planning Commission agrees they don't really want. I don't, and especially if, you know, I've heard some rumors that there might be another meeting, another vote on the expansion project at some time. Maybe we could do the zoning vote along with that, if that ends up happening. It just doesn't make sense to me, but obviously you'll do what you think is right. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Could I just add, just in response to Denise, we did change the 1/10 of an acre lot to a conditional use in the village. That's the proposal, the amendment we wanted to adopt, but we don't have the time to. And the other consideration for the 1/10 of an acre lot is we wanted to limit in a major subdivision the number of 1/10 acre lots to 30% of the subdivision. So the Planning Commission originally wanted to have a lot of 1/10 of an acre lots to make them affordable, to make housing affordable in the village. There are already 1/10 of an acre lots in the village. But we heard a lot of concern about having too many of them, and the 1/10 of an acre lot was a concern. So we made that adjustment. David Scheckman came up at the hearing and said, "Why don't you make it a conditional use?" And we did. It was a great idea. It took a lot of the anxiety about having a permitted 1/10 of a lot acre in, and we took the 30% limit. So those are the amendments we want to put in. We just didn't have time to do it. And let me just point out that once the select board warrants its hearing on the amendments, then the zoning administrator starts to review any permit under those amendments. So the timeline between voting on it and having the amendments be in effect is a couple of weeks, could be 2 or 3 weeks. It's a very short
Okay.
timeline. So just wanted to point that out.
Will, before you go off mute, can you just explain what conditional use is?
Yes, a permitted use is a use that doesn't need review, that it's like, you go ahead and do it. Conditional use is a use that has to meet certain conditions that are already set up in the zoning, where the conditional use goes before the development review board, and it has to meet all those conditions that basically have to do with its impact on the neighbors. How it fits in with the surrounding areas. And so there's a very elaborate review process for conditional use, and it's open to public comment. So that's the distinction.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Thanks. Leaf?
Alicia,
Oh, okay,
Okay.
sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
hear you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
All right.
I just trying to clarify, Will, you say that the temporal window between the actual vote on the draft as it now stands and the amendments is only a few weeks, but am I correct that at town meeting, we will be voting on the draft as it stands? And if so, are you concerned, because I'm concerned that without those amendments, that hit some of the key areas that people were really concerned about, that the draft as a whole is less likely to pass? Thank you.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to speak to whether the draft will pass, but I will say that there's 15-day warnings for amendments from the planning commission to the select board, 15-day warning commission from the select board, so that they're hearing an approval. But it's only that first 15-day warning period that until the zoning administrator can review under the new guidelines. So it can be a pretty quick process. And I'm going to ask the League of Cities and Towns if we can even shrink it up, but they're pretty conservative. I've asked to do a lot of things that they didn't think was a good idea. So, so we want to stick to the rules. We want to make sure it's all right. But because the zoning administrator can review once the select board sets their hearing date, that can be a pretty short process. Whether the whole document passes, I encourage all the town voters to vote for it, naturally. And I want, one of the things that the League of Cities Town recommended is that the select board, they could pass a resolution saying, we intend to do this as soon as possible, just to take away any or ameliorate some of the concern that people have over the small lots and these other things.
That might be very useful. How would that be, how and when would that message be disseminated to the Plainfield community at large?
The select board, if they want, they can make that resolution tonight, or they could make it at their next meeting. It's a pretty simple resolution. It's saying, we just promised to do what we said we're gonna do. And I think they do it anyway, but.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, any other thoughts?
I think I'm wondering, Will, did you come here tonight at all ready or prepared to kind of share out to I don't know if everyone here read the proposed changes to the code? And are you, I guess, able to summarize for the people who have not read the document?
I could summarize the document, the bigger document, and the bigger document does a couple of major things. One, it adopts the state mandated river corridor hazard zones, which is based on really pretty elaborate data that's been gathered by a bunch of sources. UVM, as we all know, the Great Brook is very well studied. And the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission has taken that data and created our river hazard zone. The town ability to get reimbursed for flood damage is based on the town's ability to regulate its hazards. So we really need this in place to get reimbursements for other events, because I think they'll happen. So that's one major component. The other is that it does unify all the different components, our telecommunications, or river corridors, our subdivision, and our zoning into one document. Some towns call it a unified zoning bylaw. We kept calling it zoning. So it does that. It includes Goddard into the village district. And now that Goddard is is owned by a private developer, if that property was left in the rural residential zone, he would be severely restricted into what he could do. No commercial use, couldn't open a restaurant. It really needs to be in the village. So those are kind of the three major components that were adopted. And we also got language that will have the zoning document meet the requirements that we could apply for a neighborhood development area, which will help the town develop housing. And that development area should include the village. That's one of and that application needs to be done by April. So the group that approves the neighborhood development areas only meets 4 times a year. So if we wait another 4 or 5 months, it just slows everything down. So that's sort of the broad brushstroke. There is a little more detailed explanation on the planning commission page calling it the report on the zoning. And then we have, yeah.
Thank you, Will.
Lauren has a question?
Yes.
Comment?
Plainfield, it is my understanding that this is the first time that the zoning has been redone in about 5 years. Is that true?
Longer than that.
I think it's longer, but
Since
yeah.
2001. So I would just say that I would support these proposed zoning changes because I think it's been a long time coming. And also particularly because of the urgency regarding the town's ability to get reimbursed for weather events. It seems like the timing is really good.
Thank you.
I would share, this is kind of an email we got from the chair of the Plainfield Development Board, Janice Walrafen, just a statement to be read for the record. Will not be able to attend tonight's hearing on the proposed zoning changes. So I'm writing to you to officially submit my support as a resident of Plainfield and chair of the Plainfield Development Board, the adoption of the updated zoning regulations as put before you tonight. Additionally, I support the changes submitted by the Planning Commission on 1/22/25. Thank you, Janice Walrafen. That came to the select board this evening.
Okay.
My name is Lana. I am not happy about the river corridor map because for one, it was drawn at a desk and it encompasses my whole property, which I have gone ahead and got a zoning permit to build a house there, but now my concerns are because they might not amend the map, even though I was told it was easy to amend it. I've had the scientist and the person from the state come out and they didn't find any bedrock. And so now I'm concerned about whether I would be able to insure a house if I build it there. And so I'm concerned about just adopting this river corridor map the way it is because it was drawn on at a desk. And the state is going to adopt it probably in 2028, and I don't know what that means for Plainfield, whether that means it would be adopted here at that time anyway, but I don't think, I'm not in favor of it because of those reasons. Thank you.
It sounds like the kind of thing that should be looked at more thoroughly and then decided on, which we are agreeing, I think, to take up as soon as it seems there's information to look at.
Okay.
I mean, that's an important item and I appreciate you bringing it up. Michael?
The past person.
I can say that the flood modeling that was done by UVM to lay the groundwork for that map. I've already seen that it's inaccurate from the point of view of what actually did flood and didn't flood after the July floods last year. They know that there are discrepancies. It's because they sent teams here. Vermont, actually, Plainfield is one of the most studied communities in all of Vermont. And we should be able to get very accurate information to have that changed. We're in a better position to do that than any other towns are.
And the select board is able to make these changes with the public hearing, correct?
Carl, I just point out that the language it says that the flood corridors are fluid in that any updated information that is provided will then become the overriding stuff. So it's meant to be as accurate as it can be at the point. It's not this, whatever map this isn't the final map. It can be automatically updates with new information.
We're at a point in time where we don't know everything. But we know a lot, and we know what we have to do to receive money from the state and to comply with the state regulations. Recognizing they've left it open to changes and modifications down the road. And the select board has that option. We don't have to go to a full town vote for that. Are you part of the zoning committee? Have you sat in on any of their meetings?
I have, well, no, not the zoning, just the
Yeah.
planning.
The planning, okay, I'm sorry, the planning, yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
I have sat in on two, at least, maybe three, actually, lately. Yeah, 'cause
Okay.
I just happened to stumble across that map and see that it encompassed my property, and then I sort of panicked, and I went,
yeah,
and that's when I asked at that first meeting, and Will said that it was easy to amend the map, which I know that's what he thought, but in fact, it's not easy to do, and so.
well, we'd like to see some houses built. We don't wanna throw a roadblock in, especially if it's just a rough map, so.
Yeah,
We,
Sewer and water.
yeah,
There was
Yeah.
a house there. There was
Yeah.
a mobile home. We took it out.
okay, yeah,
So,
Okay.
I mean, it's-
I think we can review that again with new data or even the data we have, but update it.
Thank you.
Right now, we need to get something into the hands of the voters on our town meeting.
I have a question. Can anyone
Yeah.
tell me the mechanisms by which the select board could amend such a map?
Yeah. That's my question.
Does it I'm curious how to follow up on something on that, for example.
The way I'd like to see it done. Oh, did you have an idea? Well,
Well, the flood map, as Michael suggested, is really based on data. And the town can't override the state's data. We're gonna have to accept we're gonna have to accept the state's best data in order to have an acceptable flood river corridor system.
yeah.
And,
What I would-
and the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission takes that data and plots it precisely as GIS plots. And so the actual drawn map that we see is a representation of that, but it may not be as accurate as the state's GIS data plot has.
As with many, we need to have anyone who has an issue to bring it before us with any facts you have and any information you can give us so that we can make an informed decision. We want to do it right. We want to make sure that you're treated fairly. But we have to look to you to bring the request. If it's very specific for your lot, then we should know about that.
Okay, I have a scientist from the state is looking into the bottom of the bank and then the 50 feet.
Yeah, yeah.
And
This is,
she is trying to help me as far as amending it, but I mean, to me, it feels like they just drew lines on it.
well, some of it is probably rough because it wasn't done by a surveyor, is my guess. But that's the kind of detail we can get into in another meeting. But
Well, and I also wondered, Will might have the connection, if the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, since they're using GIS and plotting, like this is a paper map, kind of, there's probably a computer map that gets much closer and more granular, and you might be able to, like, I think we're probably gonna have to put it back up the chain, right? Will's gonna have to go back to Central Vermont Planning Commission, who's gonna go to the state to get it changed, and so that way, like, the map changes. We won't have to change anything, because it sounds like for us to get flood money back, we have to use the state's data and map. So we just need to get the state the right data.
Exactly, and on the ground, that can be, amended, because a lot of times even the state data, as precise as it is, isn't reflective of what's on the ground. And she's worked with the river experts to come and look at her property, walk it, and do the best evaluation that they can. And we've done that on other properties. I've done it, Sandy and I, we did it on our property when we bought it, like 48 years ago. And a couple other people in town have done it and got it amended. So it's not an easy thing to do, but it makes the maps more accurate. And as Michael pointed out, there's still more information that can be entered into this database, which is the governing document, not the paper map, the PDF that we printed out.
Oh, yeah,
And I quickly, to reassure anyone, and this is not just you, Elena, but also anyone who has property near the Great Brook and property near the Winooski, that the models that UVM makes are based on drone flights, which map the underlying topography. In other words, the height and width of the bank. It's based on three-dimensional models. And they're just right now modeling the area north of the dam upstream in the direction of Marshfield as an example. So they're doing their own updating at the same time. But the most important piece of information, which I have, George Springston has, and many other people have, are the actual area photographs of where the river went in 2024 and 2023. And so if you want to consult those maps, you can arrange that with me or George. And I can help you get into those specific sections and say, well, the river didn't go there or the river did go there.
Yeah,
And that's
I mean,
part of it.
I know right where it went,
Yeah.
both years.
Well, to prove it to someone else,
Yeah.
you have that for backup.
I don't want to get bogged down too far on this,
Okay.
because we're gonna address it later. Was there another question? No. So I guess we should decide to bring this, vote on this to bring it to the meeting as is, as Will's recommending.
I would like to do that, and, you know, I would also say I'm very open to the amendments that have been proposed. I think I know for the NDA, the state requires a fifth, not a tenth, and what the planning commission has sent to us as amendments, I think is amenable, and the other stuff is frankly quite minor.
Yeah.
So the main topics that Will pointed out here, I think are very important for us
Yes,
to do, and
well, especially the reimbursements. Yeah, okay.
so I would move that we do that. That we move this article. It'll appear as Article 2 on the ballot.
Okay,
Second.
okay. Any other thoughts? All those in favor say aye. Aye. We have passed. I should mention that Patty is not here. I don't think she's on Zoom either.
I don't think she was
Okay,
available.
I believe
tonight.
she's working. So she's absent tonight. Okay, the additional items we wanted to address. Reserve fund for the expansion project. This was suggested by Vermont League to allow us to have a fund opened to any money that we can get in for this specific project from grants, from donations, from loans. And we're required, I think Sandy had told us last time, we're required to have such a fund to have a place to put money that's isolated and protected for the project, for the expansion project. So that's something that was recommended, and we would like to get that as a floor item to talk about, but we do still have to warn it. Yes.
This grew out of the discussion at last Monday's meeting, and there was, if you were here or there, watching and listening, there was discussion about, you know, what could we put on the ballot other than the bond vote? And it was suggested that something to the line along the effect of directing or the select board to explore, pursue funding for such a project, something along those lines. Anyway, Carl drafted some language. We sent it off to the League of Cities and Towns, and they came back and said, well, they asked the first question, said, what kind of town meeting do you have? Do you have a hybrid meeting? Basically, we do, which means that what we vote by Australian ballot is only what is required by law. All other questions we do from the floor. Marshfield does everything from the floor, just give you an example of a different model. And based on that, they said, well, if you're trying to gauge the sentiment of the town, then put an item that would be binding on the floor ballot. And they suggested the reserve fund as the way to do that. So that would be an article that would come up. We actually have 5 other reserve funds that are being proposed. And that article could be debated. It could be amended. Money could be put in from the floor. Those are all options for the voters at town meeting to do. And so that is what we have here. And if I might, I could read it for everyone.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll answer it.
Shall the town establish a reserve fund to be called the Village Expansion Reserve Fund for the purpose of expanding the east side of the village by acquiring land and making municipal infrastructure improvements in accordance with 24 VSA subsection 2804. And that reference is basically standard for all reserve funds. It basically says the reserve funds can only be used for the purpose stated here. The select board can't go raid it and use it for other things. So you'll see that on the other warning items. So
Yeah. And if there's money, I should just mention, if there's money in there, wherever it comes from, and the project doesn't proceed, then it gets redistributed to the community.
And
the voters have to do that.
The voters have to do that. But,
is
yeah.
this gonna be voted on Australian ballot, or is this? from
No,
the floor?
No, from the
This is
floor.
only from the floor.
It's only the
Yes.
floor. Yeah.
And are you authorizing a loan in that, or are you
No.
authorizing?
Not this one. This is just establishing a fund. The reason is, and I'll get to you in a second. The reason is, we learned Tuesday this week, after last Monday's meeting, that there's grant money that's available that could very well be coming to Plainfield. We would like to have a place to put it, if we can get that. We're gonna try for it and try for as much as we can. It's a significant amount of money. And the state is very interested in working with this town because they've seen how hard we've worked and what people have had to do to kind of recover from this disaster. So it's exciting, but I don't want to get hopes up. There's a lot of competition, but the whole amount for 2 counties in Vermont is $58 million. And Washington County and Lamoille County are the 2 counties. So we think we have a shot at some of that. And we're working hard for that, but we need this fund.
Right. From Monday's meeting, you were saying that this was going to be on the Australian ballot. Now it's moved to the floor. I'm assuming before the town takes on any liability for borrowing money, that would have to be voted on by the residents.
Yes, that is correct. And whether it's done, I guess it would have to be done. If it's borrowed, it has to be done by a vote, which means we'd have to have a special election.
Yeah, this is, according to the lawyers at the League of Cities and Towns, this is a floor vote. If it were a bond vote, it must be done by Australian
Right.
ballot. We could not do that from the floor.
That's what I understood from.
Yes.
Right. You're next, and then Dan.
Not that.
You're next, then Dan.
So I have a separate comment, but just to clarify one point that just came up, a floor vote at a town meeting can authorize a bonding up to 5 years. Any bonding longer than that has to go to Australian ballot. So there is another layer of nuance there. We could
Yeah.
have a floor vote, and initially there was proposed by the Village Expansion Steering Committee, a floor vote of a bonding measure, but the limit would have been 5 years, and the group said, well, we're optimistic about a 5-year selling of all the lots to provide less of a sense of risk. Let's put it as a 10-year borrowing arrangement, but that would require an Australian ballot listing. Does that make sense?
It does. That's not what I just heard.
Well,
Because that's a different proposal.
Yeah, we're talking about the fund.
This proposal is just to create the bucket for money,
Yeah,
not to put any money into it.
right. We're not talking about putting money into this right now.
Right. What he's saying is that a floor vote can come up and you can put a bond vote as long as it's paid off in 5 years from the floor.
if somebody brought it up,
If it was an article that was warned,
it has to be warned, right?
It's different from the reserve fund.
that's correct.
Yes. Yeah,
We're not proposing warning that.
Well, I think Arian still had a comment. and
yeah,
I-
Arian has finished his, then Dan, and then
So,
you.
yeah, sorry, that was just a clarifying comment. So, you know, our group, our citizen group has asked the select board, and we had a lengthy conversation on Monday about warning a bonding article to actually help this project move forward in 2025. And while we're very optimistic about, you know, the grant funds that are specific to Washington and Lamoille County, if those funds even were given to us, we probably wouldn't see them until the second half of this year, which means that moving forward on this project in 2025 is not possible unless we have some way that we can assure that that there is money to do that. And the specific things that we would need to move forward on, even if they were later repaid back by grant funding, is final engineering and some permitting expenses to the tune of about $150,000. If we had this reserve fund, people could make the criticism that, you know, well, we can do this next year. Why are we pushing to do it this year? I think there has been a significant amount of conversation to say there are reasons having to do with housing shortages, having to do with buyouts that are happening in town in 2025. To move forward with this year, which we do feel is still possible. But we need to have a way to actually get money for that final engineering to move that forward. Our group met earlier this week and said, we understand that there's some hesitation from the select board, and while we would love to have a bonding article on the March 4th vote, and we still would encourage consideration of that, as a compromise proposal, we're saying this dedicated account, reserve account, sorry, what's the right?
Reserve.
This
Yeah,
reserve, have a
reserve.
reserve article on the March 4th ballot. And if that passes, and the town has secured a purchase option with the land sellers, and a detailed budget with schematic engineering drawings and the neighborhood layout from the upcoming community design workshop on February 8th, are all presented to the public. Once those are all there, the select board pass a resolution contingent upon those things to hold a special meeting before the second half of April for a bond vote. Does that make sense? It's a lot of conditions there.
I think it's really important to remind everyone that whatever money we're talking about right now is expected to be paid back by the sale of the property. And we don't want to lose track of that, I think. It's not quite the same thing as building a school.
Another thing that's also important is that partially funding the project doesn't get us a product that we can sell. And
Yeah.
so it's inherently problematic if we say, well, we just authorized part of the funding. And if we don't have a mechanism to get all the way to the end that we know of, I wouldn't want to vote for it to start, because we're up a creek without a paddle at that point, and that's not a good spot to be.
You want to talk on this, Lauren? Yeah.
Well, I just have a question.
Yeah.
If after a vote for establishing a reserve fund, and if that vote was positive to set up the reserve fund on March 4th, then Arian has mentioned the possibility of then moving forward with a bond vote in April, perhaps at a special meeting.
Mhm.
And I assume that you all know what the mechanism to do that is. I don't, but that's okay. But I'm also wondering if we were so fortunate at a later date to receive some of the federal money, $58 million that's being made available to Washington and Lamoille counties, could that money be used to repay the loan?
You want to address that?
Yeah, well, so it wouldn't even have to repay the loan. I mean, it could repay the loan if it came late enough. The
Yeah,
thing is the $2.5 million that they're talking about is like a line of credit.
yes, I understand.
When we pass it, it's $0. We haven't, and then the select board has to take options. So depending on how fast they move, we get $1 million from the federal government. All of a sudden, our need is only $1.5 million instead of 2.5. It could also be used to pay back the money. So like, it could be in front of it could be to pay it off. And that's why, you know, we have these great people in town looking at grants, doing all this work, like, all of that can make it so that we don't even have to put ourselves out there financially, that much risk.
Okay, and is this an application process that the grants administrator would be taking on for the federal fund?
The grants administrator is definitely
Very
on top of this. I sit in all those meetings. They're definitely on top of this. This one, your hand to come up first.
I think the maximum she spoke of for each town was $10 million. And I don't know what else that we're gonna need money for in the town.
Lots of.
For,
Yeah, well,
so I was just thought I'd bring that up, you know, that we can only get 10 million maybe. It's not 58 million, it's 10 million maximum per.
yeah, and that's no guarantee at
And
all.
it's no guarantee at all,
But,
and we
but-
also have a lot of other things that we need
The
to.
point is, we have our annual budget's around 1.3 million. Any money is a big help, so we're gonna go for all we can. Yes,
Just to speak to why we would be even optimistic, Elena, is that when we found out about this, I'm on the funding group too, that when we found out about the availability of this money, we were being encouraged to apply for it. We were being told that we were likely to be considered highly in the priorities of who would need it most. And when we had a discussion, we knew there are many places to put the money, including things like the sewer and water system, or in sidewalks, or something like that. There's a list of things that everybody knows. They're waiting to hear from us how big that list is, and they express optimism about helping us with most of it. So I just want to say that it's a fluid process, but it really is encouraged by the people providing the money.
There's
and
no
this-
match or anything.
No match.
No match.
no, it's no match, and in fact, we can use this money, if we should get the grants, to match other loans that do have matches. We can use that money for that match, which is unusual, so,
Well, and the 68 million is for housing, right?
And the number one priority for funding in a competitive program is housing and infrastructure for housing.
yeah,
So that's an important part that we need to consider in our application, because if we say X, Y, and Z, but no housing, it actually will reduce the chances that we are funded.
right,
That's what they said.
That's what the state is telling us, because I'm also part of that grant group.
yeah. And they spoke very highly of the work that Plainfield, all the folks in Plainfield who've been working on all these things have been doing. They're very impressed, which I see as a good sign that they're going to look at us favorably. And so, that's where we're at.
I should say the language is that they say Plainfield's ahead of the curve, and they're comparing us with all the other communities that might be applying. We've done all the dotting of i's and crossing of t's, which people are still figuring out elsewhere what to do. So they also trust us to be able to use that money wisely. They know that we're on the ball.
Mhm. Lauren, you had another question?
Well, I member of the village, the Plainfield Village, expansion committee, and, you know, we definitely did have some serious discussion following your meeting on Monday night, and I think most of us were hoping that we would be able to put up the vote for the bond on March 4th, because we feel very optimistic about our prospects for the project, and we feel that, you know, the Vermont Community Foundation is a philanthropic organization that I think is, and I also think that, you know, I've talked to some of my friends who are realtors in the area, and they definitely feel that given what we know about the budget for the overall project and what she knows about the cost of lots and the availability of lots in Plainfield, which she says is nil really right now, that the prospects for selling these lots is extremely good, and that they are basically very relatively affordable compared to other, compared to past Plainfield sales, and also compared to other surrounding towns, including Berlin and Montpelier. So, but if, you know, the will of the people seems to be that the first step would be to set up the reserve fund, then I think that that's a good way to sort of test out the amount of enthusiasm for the project. I will say that I have heard from many people who are enthusiastic about the project.
Thank you. Dan,
Yeah, I mean, so I think the reserve fund itself is definitely a no-brainer. Like, we just set up, the last meeting I was at, I had to miss Monday because I had the flu, but we set up like 6 reserve funds or something at the budget meeting. So like
Yeah.
this is something that we did, and it's pretty typical when you're trying to isolate money. I think, to me, it feels like we're trying to convolute and complicate the process of actually getting support for this project. The thing that's gonna show support for the project is the bond vote that says we wanna spend money on the project. I mean, I think as an idea, it's much easier, and I don't know that it makes much sense for us to not use the biggest collection of voters that we're gonna get this year to make the decision about if we should spend that money, and have a special election that will have a much lower turnout, make that decision. And in the last 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 months, that the group has done, and that the scoping and the sampling and the neighbor, I went to one of the neighbor meetings up in the field, and informational meetings and informational packets and updated frequently asked question sheets, seems like daily. Like, they've done the work, and there's obviously a few pieces left because it's an ongoing project, but I think it has way more information going for it than a lot of the things that we vote on or putting, or are potentially putting on the ballot. And so I just don't know why we're not putting this on the ballot, letting the voters decide. It's totally up to them. If people don't feel like they have enough information and they vote no, that's what they do. If people think it's a good idea, they vote yes. Again, we don't take any money out the day we vote on it. We will have to take action as a select board over and over and over again to take money, to spend money. Like, this is going to be an ongoing fiscal, like, responsibility of the board. And I think the last thing I'll say is we have spent many weeks, especially with the recent health scares with our clerk and treasurer. Before that, we've had so many issues, the floods, all these things. We've been in scramble mode. Now we're gonna add an election onto the backs of our town workers right after this election, when we have an election right in front of us. Like, it doesn't make any sense for us to be adding complication and adding more work for our town at a time when we can just let the voters decide. There's gonna be informational meetings with this project. People can look at it. Again, if they don't think there's enough facts, enough information, vote no. And if you do think there's enough facts, there's enough information and enough promise, you vote yes. I mean, that's the whole point of the democratic process, and the whole point of having one big election every March for our local stuff, so that people can focus in on that election and take action.
and we will be having an informational hearing. As
Well, and
as
it won't be
required.
about the bond if it's not on the ballot.
That's right. That's right. If it were on the ballot, we would have a meeting. I think your hand was first.
Okay, well,
Lauren.
Monday, you weren't here Monday.
I had the
mean,
flu, yeah.
And I think what was discussed was that possibly because people feel they don't have enough information and it's a vote, they might vote no. And then there's no interest, it doesn't show that there's any interest in a project, and then it would hamper the grant process. If the town votes no on something, then, and we try to get a grant for it, it doesn't seem like I think that's what we talked about on Monday.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's how we
And
came
so-
up with, we weren't trying to convolute it, we were
Yeah.
trying to make it so that more people would show interest in it,
Mhm.
I
So
think.
all I'll say is, from my conversations in town, talking to a lot of different people, I see a lot of interest. I hear a lot of people interested. I'm the executive director of Vermont Conservation Voters now. I've worked in elections since 2002. I've worked on a lot of different kinds of campaigns, like elections is the thing I do for my job a lot. I have seen people lose election issues, and then sometimes they do go away. Sometimes you lose that election issue and it catalyzes people and they come up with a second plan, and then it takes off. I don't think one lost election is going to have this terrible effect. I also don't think that the state is going to turn down an opportunity to build housing in a place. I mean, unless we said we're not gonna take the money, the grants, I just don't think that's realistic. And I think I find it hard for me as one of 4 people that are here to overrule the judgment of the 17 or whatever people that are on the village expansion group who have been doing this work, doing hundreds of hours and saying the best thing to do is put it on the ballot on March 4th. They're volunteered all their time, they put in hundreds of hours and they're saying the best thing we should do is do this. Let the people decide then. The second best thing would be a special election, which will cost the town money, cost the town employees to do more work, and we'll have a smaller turnout. That's the second best thing, but the best thing to do is to do it on March 4th. And I'd rather trust them, and they're the ones that have been driving this project. They're the ones that are gonna deal most with if the vote goes no. So that's who I would stand with personally.
Doug?
No, the woman.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your name, would you say your name? Thanks.
A question for Danny, I think you may have answered this, but I'm just, he's wanting to put it on the ballot.
Yes,
How are we gonna, you said there's gonna be an informational meeting.
yeah,
Yeah.
Will we let people know that it's on the ballot and that's what this is for? Because I've sat in on many of these, and I am also just fully disclosed, I am one of the 4 homeowners that butts up against
Mhm.
the property out there. And, we sat in and it's the same players at the meeting, so if we have another informational meeting, is there gonna be any information on voting day, on town meeting day? For the people to see, because my guess would be that at the informational meeting, it's gonna be the same people that we see sitting in the room and online, so.
it would be it's the election informational meeting, so it would be about the whole election.
Okay.
And it has to happen within 10 days of the election, so 10 days before the election, so whatever, February 24th and whatever the day before is. And so we would set a date, it would be public. The town moderator, Donnie Osmond, who also moderates town meeting, usually moderates that meeting. And the different articles that are up, including the planning stuff and everything else, would be presented, talked about, information given, and questions asked. And it'll also, the article itself will be in the town meeting report. My guess is the folks that, want the village expansion will continue to communicate with the community and try to get more information out there and answer questions.
So at that point, would we have more information on what's going into this 2.5 million? Will it be broken down at that point for us as voters to know that, it's $200,000 to put the sewer in, it's $600,000 for the land, it's the roads are this, is it going to tell us? And I know the charrette is gonna spell out some of
Yeah.
the planning on that, and I'm planning to be there.
Yeah, well, they're shaking their head, yes, yes, that is the plan, is that by that informational meeting, that will be.
And as Lauren published in a on Front Porch Forum today on an FAQ, there are 2 items that are pending that line item breakdown. One is the and very importantly, the negotiation of the final purchase price, which, there's an appraisal that's pending, but ultimately the town has to negotiate that option because, a legal entity has to actually do it.
And I should say,
Yeah.
the town has talked to an attorney who's a real estate attorney who would act on our behalf to do that negotiation. None of us up here feel ethically we can do that. But this attorney has experience in land transfers and so forth. So that would establish the price of the land, which is one of the holdups. And that should be decided by this informational meeting. We're expecting that. We certainly would have the appraisal by then, which is done by,
The 11th, it's due by the 11th of February.
Yeah.
Which is necessary for that negotiation. And then shortly after the design workshop, the final pricing on those per line items will be done, because right now they sort of said, what's the longest the road could be? What's the longest the water could be? And then we'll actually have, here's the actual layout, and then by line item. As mentioned previously, it disadvantages the town if we publish a specific purchase price for the land, because then that puts the town in a disadvantaged position for negotiating on that purchase price.
right? Doug?
I was here Monday, and it seemed to me that both you and Peter had concerns that there was not enough information for you guys to make any sort of judgment. I felt the same way. I've asked some of the questions and I got the answer that we can't tell you what the price is. We can't tell you how many lots, we can't tell you where the road's gonna go, any of this kind of stuff. In the information that you put out on Plainfield People or wherever it was, it stated that you had had a meeting in executive session with the select board. Is that accurate?
No,
No,
That's on Plainfield People on the 19 questions that you
There's
had.
information that's been shared that would be covered by executive session.
Right.
That's not what it said.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
so
once
I
again,
just wanted to
if
be
you
clear
have-
that it was not an executive session that we were not aware of.
No,
No.
every
So you
executive
don't have
session
any
has to be
further
warned.
information than you did Monday, correct?
correct.
that's right, yeah. As Peter said last time, this is the only time we get together,
That's,
Monday and tonight.
that's why I was asking, because what I read and what you said are in direct conflict.
Yeah,
I didn't read whatever that was because I'm too busy today, but
I will go back.
as of the meeting on Monday,
There is something, but we anyway.
I share the same position that I was in on Monday. Couple of the things that we raised on Monday were the new municipal code of ethics, which we have adopted, it is state law. And there's a very prominent piece of that which says that you cannot have a unique contract with someone who holds offices in town. And so we have asked the Ethics Commission for guidance and have not heard yet whether we can in fact buy this property from the town clerk. There's nothing against Bram at all. It's just the situation. We don't have an answer to that question. Some of my other concerns have to do with the, and there's been a very, I would say, active exchange of emails between Arian and Michael Zonner about whether this project would in fact be able to be done at the accelerated timetable because of Act 250 exemptions or the lack thereof. And I can tell you, I've seen more JOs, what do they call it, jurisdictional opinions of, Act 250 regional people and state, and opinions by people at regional planning and the state, but they're not legal opinions, they're on and on. And I would say that's an open question. Now, the legislature is trying to streamline the process even further. But having served in the legislature and dealt with Act 250 debates, I would say that if there's a very high likelihood that that will not be decided until the night of adjournment. And a deal that is cut then. That's just the way Act 250 stuff goes at the State House. And, I don't think we're gonna know that issue. The only way that happens is to, put in an application. This is a subdivision. It's a subdivision, okay? And, it's subject to the subdivision regulation. So, beyond that, I think I've heard a lot of opinions expressed since Monday. The only comments that I have received, email, on the street and in the phone, have been an appreciation of us not putting the bond vote on the ballot. That's where we are. I will say this, if we were to put the bond vote on the ballot, we have current language that is proposed by the bond counsel that the steering committee, Eli, and I forget his last name at the moment. Emerson, thank you. I'm gonna write it down because I always forget it. Thank you. We had discussion Monday as to whether, and Carl, you had amendment language that Arian had adopted.
yeah,
Right now, I prepared for this evening 3 different versions of articles that we would go forward with. They were the version that includes a bond vote includes the original language. So we would have to, if we did that tonight, we would have to retype that all of us would have to, as select board members, assemble tomorrow, sign the printed copy in order to meet the legal deadlines for warning town meeting. We would also, prior to the bond vote, have to pass what is called a necessity resolution. And that necessity resolution, as drafted, had problems. It could be because it was signed by Bram in the draft. It could be signed by someone else, but it makes the following declaration: that this project and this bond has been determined to be in the public good. And we were hesitant to make that determination without guidance from the voters as to whether they wanted it or not. Okay, so those are some of the technical things that have to happen to do a bond vote. And I haven't changed my mind about whether we should do it. I don't think we should have it here. One last thing I would say on that. Bond votes, if you have a bond vote and it is turned down, you can't bring it up for a year. Again, essentially the same vote. And so, given the fact that a lot of people are still asking for details of information, of the costs of, and other questions, the risk of it being turned down would mean you could not bring that up again for another year. And that rather, we wanted to test the sentiment of the voters by having another article on the warning on this subject. And after consultation with the lawyers at League of Cities and Towns, and I saw there was a question, have we gotten legal advice? Yes, we've gotten some legal advice on some of these things. Was to go the route of the reserve fund ballot item that would be subject to floor debate. Where people with any opinion, they, could ask whatever they want, et cetera. They could be amended, money could be put on it, into the reserve fund, et cetera. But that would give the select board guidance, legitimate guidance, binding guidance as to whether the town was interested in going forward with this project. We could then warn a bond vote. Maybe we'll hear about the community development block grant before then, and we won't need to borrow any money, or we would need to borrow less. Things could happen in the interim. I don't know about the April 15th date. If you back away from there, we have the same rules for notification, et cetera. My rough calculations, and this is really rough because I really didn't have time to spend on it this afternoon, was we'd go from March 4th to March 11th. In March 11th, we'd have to warn in order to get April 15th. So it doesn't give us a lot of time in between to get the details that people are looking for, or a land deal negotiated. We would probably hear, I hope we would hear within 30 days from the Ethics Commission as to whether we could go forward there, or what our alternatives might be on that route. But I do think that based on all of that, we are wiser to delay the bond vote at this time, to test this at town meeting, and then set a date for the bond vote. I think we risk having it turned down, which would send a message to the state folks who want to support us that they're not interested in that. And I think that's not a message that we want to send, certainly not prematurely.
Dan.
Yeah, lots there. I mean, I think there's gonna be complications in a project this size. If the property, we can't buy it from Graham, even if we say we wanna get a loan, we just would never ask for any money from the loan, right? Because we can't buy the property, we would never do any of the other pieces. So that's gonna happen one way or the other. That doesn't actually change when we get the loan and how we get the loan. I mean, there's a cost to doing an election. I don't know if you have that number, how much it costs us to run an election. There are costs there. I don't think it's in our budget. We didn't put a second election in our budget. There's not in last year's budget, but
No,
how many hours of staff
when the
time?
school budget got turned down?
Well, I know.
You have to do it.
Well, I know, and I also remember how stressed our staff was trying to do a second election in a time when they were understaffed and overworked and had way too many things to do. And we are consciously choosing to do that to them again at a time when we've just told them that we're gonna try to take burdens off of them, not add burdens to them, as part of the work culture. I understand where you're coming from a lot of these pieces, but how are we gonna know that we've gotten enough answers for people. Like, there are going to be people who live in this community who are gonna have more questions no matter how many answers we give them. Do we keep giving answers until every single person says, I've had enough answers? Like,
Well,
how
to
do we
answer- to answer
quantify
that-
it?
To answer that question, Dan, I mean, look at what we just did with the zoning. Okay, there are still questions on the
And we're
zoning,
gonna put it on the ballot.
but on balance, I thought it was fine to go forward.
I
Because the
know.
majority of the questions were answered in my mind. I don't think that's the question here. I mean, I could give you, and I sent an email to Carl prior to the last meeting. He asked, what are the questions for bond council? And I asked a couple of them last week. If you'd like, I could go over them, okay? In the statute, we can set the terms of interest. We could say at an interest rate not to exceed. We can set the terms of the loan at a period of number of years not to exceed. There are other things we can do on there. The language that we have right now does none of those things. It just says, it doesn't set an interest rate, it doesn't set a term, it just says we go borrow. Questions I would have for bond council. Must we put this out to bid if it would pass? Okay. If you look at the statutes, it says that if it's over $1 million, not only do you have to put it out for bid, but you have to advertise in New York or Boston financial papers. Okay, I don't know the cost of that. There are any number of things. If you look at the bond, here's an important one. The taxation, when we set the tax rates every year, we must, when we build the budget, put in how much is interest and how much is principal on any bond that we have. And that must be included in each year's tax rates. The steering committee has suggested that we go and seek what's the word I'm looking for? A non-amortized loan, meaning you pay only interest, the principal is only due at the end, okay? And, you could pay down as you go, but there's a balloon payment at the end. That's what legally we would be signing up for in a non-amortized loan. In an amortized loan, a typical loan, there's interest and principal each year. So I did some calculations at 2% interest, because we've heard 2% or 0% from one of the funding sources. On an amortized loan at 2%, we're talking over $200,000 a year added to the budget. At 5%, it's over $300,000 added to the budget on an amortized loan of 10 years. You can go and take $2.5 million over 10 years. Anybody can go online, get an amortization table and do that. And that's what's required by us as budgeting going forward. These are the kinds of details that we have to think through and say where we do. This year when we were advertising 1.3 million, I forget what our increase is over the general funds that we raised last year.
I think it's
2.8%.
Yeah,
But that's like, it's less than $100,000 in there. This is several times that.
Well,
Okay,
but that's money that once we've taken the money.
that's correct.
So like if we don't take $2.5 million at one time, then you don't amortize $2.5 million unless you've taken all $2.5 million.
That's correct.
So like if we take $100,000 in the next fiscal year or in the next, then we would be, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but and
Well,
again, I feel really
you take
bad
a loan,
because
you take a loan.
they gave us this language a while ago, weeks ago. And I feel like we as a select board have not done the work. Why haven't we asked these questions 3 weeks ago? Why haven't we asked these questions 4 weeks ago?
We asked these at the one and only first meeting that it came before us, which was last week.
Yes, but that's our fault for not putting it on the agenda.
We were asked 3 weeks ago to put it on the agenda. It came in on a Wednesday.
We gave them
It came in on a Wednesday or Thursday
We gave them
night.
a timeline. We told them, give us what you want, give us the language for January
We had a
13th.
3-hour budget meeting. They asked to be on that agenda and we said, we got our hands full. Come to the next meeting.
But it's based on what we asked. They came to us in December. They came to us in December
They
and
did
said,
not propose language to us.
no, they said, when would you like the proposed language? And Carl and we said January 13th.
Well,
We have failed in
I
this.
don't want to argue the history here.
No, I do, because it's like,
We are where we are.
yes, we are where we are.
let's let's let Lauren say something. huh?
Well, sure that the loan that's being proposed is a non-amortized loan, correct?
It doesn't say that.
But that's what it is.
Not necessarily. The Vermont Community Foundation may have said that, but what we as the legislative body for this town and the legal responsibilities that we have, but if we're proposing a bond vote, it must be done under the laws of the statutes of the state of Vermont. So when we pass this and we say, must we put it out to bid? We put it out to bid. Maybe the Vermont Community Foundation is the successful bidder. Maybe they come in with the most favorable terms, et cetera, and we go with that, but there's no guarantee of that.
So you're saying could be amortized or non-amortized, depending on who gets
That's
it.
correct.
But
Yeah.
you don't have to accept any.
Pause 1 second, the hand in front.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, so I really don't understand a lot of what's going
Oh,
on.
can you
Name,
say
please.
your name? for the
Eli.
record, please?
Eli Barlow.
Yep.
But to my understanding, it's, we could put this up for vote, you could put the bonded language up for vote on Australian ballot. And then you all, as the board, could decide whether or not the specific loan that we can offer you or organize is acceptable or not, right? After the town has voted to approve. So you would be in charge of saying, is 10 years long enough? Is a 2% non-amortized loan okay? Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
I think with your amended language, yes.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank
I have a very interesting question.
Yeah.
What?
Name, please.
What's the benefit of the town being involved in this land deal? Why would you do it as a private developer in that White Office?
Yeah, you may have missed some of the conversation Monday. There's a few reasons that this committee is proposing this. One is the folks who are interested in helping us are gonna help a nonprofit or a town in terms of loans or in terms of grants, more than a private developer. There are also folks who are interested, such as Habitat for Humanity and others who are already said they would like to buy some property to build homes. They wouldn't do that with a private.
Just seems like all the stuff you guys are talking about. If a regular developer comes here, is asking to rezone it and do all these changes, the answer would be no, or it has to go before a board. But it just seems like there's a lot of, I mean, you guys aren't in a decision, as a select board, where you agree with each other. How can you make a decision for like Elena's part of their river ordinance, and you're gonna come back to do an amendment? I would feel like if I was Elena, I don't know if I got the answer that I wanted to hear tonight, and if it was something that could be amended later on, is it gonna be amended? It just seems like there's a lot of confusion between you guys, and it would simplify it if it was a developer and a town. Now, town, like, a developer.
Yep.
Jared Birchmore, I think that, an argument for it to be, a project that is in coordination and, taken on by the town versus a private developer, certainly as something that the steering committee of the expansion project has talked about, is being able to take on more of the, logistics and the actual coordination of trying to make this a project that people displaced by flooding in Plainfield or people who are local to Vermont to Plainfield or surrounding areas are able to have more of a first chance at being a part of Plainfield and staying in Plainfield. With a private developer, you lose any and all control of that element. It just becomes them developing it, selling it for the highest the highest rate that they would be able to get from it. And we as a community have no say in that. So I think that's an argument for, you know, taking on this added complexity and responsibility.
Yeah, you want to hand the mic to Laura, but I'll let Michael go here. You had your
I
hand
would
up.
just say that this is being proposed as a model to deal with the housing crisis in Vermont, which is Governor Scott has made one of his 2 top priorities, and I think the legislators looking at that too, and I think if a private, first of all, the land is already zoned according to the village zoning, so people.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is
As of,
currently
as
zoned.
as of 24 or 2011.
Yes, this 23 acres is zoned according to the village, the current village zoning. So a private developer could come in and they could decide to put down a number of houses. They could put down 4 houses and sell them for, you know, $1 million each. The point of the steering committees or the expansion projects, interest in this is, first of all, to try to make homes available to people who were displaced by the flood, first from Plainfield, then from Vermont, for other Vermonters. And the fact that we are able, that we have an offer from the Vermont Community Foundation for a 2% interest loan makes the whole project much more affordable, makes it us able to potentially sell lots that are much more affordable to Vermonters, which is what the whole point of the project is.
I also just want to say.
State your
that
name for the record, please.
Jake McBride.
Thank you.
I think another concern that I would have with a private developer is just that, you know, their sole interest would be making money. And there are neighbors here who obviously cared about their property and the effect of the project on it. And so if this, you know, if the town doesn't buy this property, someone else could develop it, and we would have absolutely no say in what that looks like. Which is, you know, fine, but personally, I think that the neighbors should have, you know, a say in what that looks like. And then,
Having to establish a cost per lot as the project starts and finished, because there's a lot of cost and you're not gonna know until the project's done. So
I can't speak to the.
Well,
I can
answer.
My point was more just why the town is involved.
Let's just get clear on
Yeah, that's
that.
good.
Michael,
Yeah.
followed by, you want to take some online?
Thank you.
Oh,
Michael
thanks for
Goldstein,
noticing.
Emergency Management Director, as well as sitting on a couple of the key committees. I wanted to say that, first of all, Eric DaCosta and Graham Tobin, who own that lot, are going to sell it to somebody. That's not arbitrary, it's actually clear, and that anyone who has been concerned about there being construction there or being extra traffic or all those other considerations that have been brought up as potential changes to the village, those changes will occur one way or the other. It's just what kind of people will be attracted to the lots and what kind of people will be coming in and out of town, what kind of people will choose to live there. The second point I would make is that there may be some background sentiment that we just don't want to grow our population. Why should we have a whole lot of new people moving into Plainfield? When we are in fact, like I'm approaching 80, and I'm not gonna live that long, so in a way I almost should have nothing to say about it, because people who are in their 50s and younger are the key to our community succeeding and becoming more vital in the future. I want to invite those people here. The kinds of funding that we have been offered, or the kind of expertise that we have been given. There are plenty of people who would cost a ton of money who have been giving their expertise to this project with no charge so far. And the town, the churches, when I mean churches, I mean faith-based group like Southern Disaster Relief people who are available with building teams to build at half the cost that construction may cost under commercial rules, and the kind of support that we're getting potentially to do the infrastructure building, to do the connecting to the rest of the town, so we have a walkable village. None of that would be considered by a private developer, but all part of the equation, because we are proposing a publicly controlled project as opposed to a privately controlled project.
We have a couple folks on the line here.
Haven't any yet.
What's that?
I'm just noting, we, just Janice.
Yeah,
Alicia,
Denise, you want to say
and
something?
Annie, we've not.
And then,
Thanks.
Yeah.
I really, really do appreciate the work of this committee and the expertise and the energy and the passion and the compassion. And I know that it's, it's very easy to sit on the sidelines and say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why don't you do it the other way without doing something constructive oneself? And I understand that. But then to speak to the the sort of the I guess I could just call it an argument between Peter and Dan just now. It touches on something that's been concerning to me and many others from the beginning about the process, and that is the question of whether this committee is truly a citizen group or whether it's part of the select board. Whether, and Dan, I have to say, I didn't understand why he kept saying we as the select board and they as the steering committee, because in fact he is or has been from the beginning on the steering committee. And I understand that's how it is in a small town and there are overlaps, and I'm not trying to suggest that there's anything, dirty going on at all. You're all doing your work to try to help the town. But the fact is, I believe that Peter is right, that the select board officially has not been kept in the loop about this very, very important project that, potentially could change Plainfield forever. And there's been a sense, I feel, what I hear from the steering committee, from certain members anyways, that um, there's been a sense that it's already been approved, that everyone's in favor of it. And it just seems like it's backwards. The way that the planning, the zoning got changed in order to benefit this project before the people voted on this project. Things like that. It just seems backwards. It's as if this unofficial project that we have not agreed that we want, that the select board has never negotiated or discussed until, last week, is driving things. It's backwards, and maybe that's just the only way it could happen, but it's just troubling. And then, so at this point, I mean, frankly, I'm actually in favor of it coming to vote because I think it's going to be voted down. But uh, I've been troubled by the way it's processed and the way it hasn't been transparent and the way the steering committee meetings have not been open and the minutes have not been available to people and they haven't even allowed people to come and watch. It's troubling. But I do know that it was that the intention was good. I know that. Thanks.
okay, we have a couple other questions, so thank you, Denise. Ann Coughlin?
Hi, yeah, I'm in favor of the village expansion project moving forward. And I think in regards to the timing, I live down in the village, and so a lot of my neighbors have applied for buyouts. And they're gonna get that money probably in a year and a half or so. And I would like this project to be at a phase that they would be able to take their buyout money and buy something in Plainfield Village that they could afford. And I think that I really want to thank the steering committee for all the work in pushing this forward and having that foresight to see that when this neighborhood of people that lost their homes hopefully get those buyout, that money, that they'll have a place to buy something affordable and be able to stay in our village. So thank you.
Thank you. Alicia?
Yeah. I think I've shared some of the perceptions Janice spoke about, including believing in the overall integrity and good intentions and very, very hard work, but it has felt like an exclusive process. It has felt at times inverted. At one of the planning commission meetings, who I think is incredible and wonderful and a great gift to the town, did say, well, our discussion of the 1/10 of an acre is being driven by the expansion committee. So let's be real, it has been driving certain things perhaps before they've been broadly discussed. That said, I think there are some incredible strengths to this. I would love more back and forth. I was a little concerned at one point where an issue was raised about, I think it was traffic or something, and a member, and this may just be me being hypersensitive, but a member of the expansion committee, or the steering committee, whatever, responded, well, when we start going, we'll work with neighbors. Well, isn't it that point a broader group than this original steering committee? I expect them to be involved, but at the point that it becomes a town project, I would hope there'd be a larger pool of people at the table. That said, I'm not, I'm for this moving forward, but in good time. And as it makes sense. And I'm not quite sure, in terms of everything Peter has said, that we are ready to bring the bond for the vote. But that said, I'm a little confused because I keep hearing, on the one hand, a private developer could come in and do anything. And when I've attended steering committee, zoning commission meetings, or planning commission meetings, sorry about that, I had a long day. What I hear is, well, anybody who comes in and builds would still have to have certain projects approved by the planning commission. So I'm a little confused there. Thanks.
Just,
Uh,
do you have a direct response? Or I'll have to stop.
Do you want Sandra to talk?
Yeah, Sandra's got it.
Yeah, Sandra.
Sure.
Hi, folks. I am acting as a consultant and a volunteer for the steering committee, and I wanted to just add a couple of details. I would say that I'm in no way an expert on the land transaction or bond votes in general. I do want to assure you that from what I've seen, both the consultant team that's working on the project and the committee themselves have been as focused and coordinated as they can with this goal of getting lots ready for people to build on as soon as possible. My experience has not been that it's been rushed, but rather focused. And also that the group is conservative. I know that the engineer and I have been working on the pieces that we know as well as we can, using unit costs when we don't know the exact amount. But there are a number of unknowns about the actual design that's going to be done on the 8th. So we have gotten all the pieces in place. We felt very comfortable with the $2.5 million as a maximum outlay. That also, we should very quickly after that SHREP, because we've prepared, we should have more numbers that are also broken down in the normal categories for construction. As I understand it, this project would be basically have an off-ramp for the town until the final decision is made to go forward, which that would be a point where the permits are done and the actual cost of construction for the infrastructure is known. If the town has an off-ramp like that, there's very little risk exposure. And at the same time, if lots can start to be pre-sold, the town should also know what the revenue is going to look like, that part of the equation. So we really have been doing everything we can to bring the risk down as close to zero as we can. And I remain extremely optimistic about the project. And I'm very happy to bring more numbers through the steering committee as soon as we can get them to you.
Thank you. We're getting really, we have a few motions we have to make and we have to get done tonight. I saw two other hands up, I think. I could take those.
I would like Mo to speak also, but Lloyd. go
Okay.
first.
I just had one thing. I'm not opposed to this, I think it's a great project, I just think that the town can be separate from it, from the development group. And I think that, like, someone just mentioned that the buyouts ain't gonna be complete for a year and a half. So it seems like there's time.
They'll be done this year, they'll be done this year according to Vermont Emergency Management.
I just feel like a lot of people would feel more comfortable if the town was separated from the development group. I know there are some benefits to it, but.
I think you
as
should.
Development could set
Yeah.
their own rules, saying town residents that got
Mhm.
lost in a flood have first option, you can do their own things, but it just feels like there's a lot of conflict of interest between the select board and the steering commissions and the town clerk, and there's a lot of uneasiness with people.
There was what other, Lauren, did you?
Well, I would just say that, the steering committee we're not private developers that would be able to take on that project, and if we were, we wouldn't be able to do it as affordably as this particular model that's being proposed. Or be eligible for those loans or anything from the BCF. The other thing I would say, that just in terms of transparency, I just want to point out that we have had two very detailed informational sessions that were recorded that are available. So if people want to listen for 2.5 or 3 hours to the sessions that we had with the public, they're available on our website. The January 12th one is probably the best audio, and it really does cover a lot of the things that have been raised tonight.
Thank you. Is this real quick?
Real quick, I was at the January 12th, I got zero information or where money is being spent on it, as far as any sort of layout. Plus, the town is not a developer either, so you're not a developer, they're not a developer.
Okay.
I don't think it should be put on the vote until there are specifics out to every person in the town, so they know what they're voting on, and you know what you're proposing.
I think this is Harry, and I think we have shown what is required to put those out there, and that we hope to have that we expect to have those before there would be any potential vote. And I think that, if there's not, then, vote no.
But people are gonna vote and they're not gonna know what they're voting on. That's the
We live in
problem.
democracy, and people are adults, and we need to trust them to make a democratic vote, because that's their right.
And they have to stay informed.
I'm informed, I've been at every one of these meetings.
Yeah.
I don't have any idea where $2.5 million is going.
Mhm.
So
Neither does Peter.
may I speak?
Yes, you're.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we are caught in some kind of time bubble, inside of which that which we all want to happen can't seem to happen. And it's really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. The details that you're waiting for, I just heard there are a few select details yet to come in. The assessment of the land, the valuation is not scheduled till February 11th. Meanwhile, we are in town limbo about the requirements for town meeting from the state legislatures, the recommendations or the demands of the League of Cities and Towns, how we need to do all the many things we need to do, and their connected relationships to a lot of moving pieces on the board. Meanwhile, indeed, this town has seen a lot of disasters, a lot of health emergencies. Indeed, Dan, you were out last week. I regret that you were not here for that discussion, truly. I'm glad you're here tonight, and I hope you're feeling better. And I understand that you are ill right now. Thank you. And so here we go. We're all just here doing it. I have to include a note to my fellow select board that an invitation, please, to not talk over one another. So if we feel like heat rising, take a breath, listen to one another. Don't talk over one another. We're not here to argue. We're here to discuss what's best for the town. And that needs to be a note that is shared. You know, it's not optimal. I mean, I want to say to what Dan said, it is faultless logic that it doesn't make any sense to have another election immediately after this one. And though there are extenuating circumstances that make that, I mean, the working group, the village expansion working group has like come up with a proposal that is a compromise modified proposal that sees ultimately 2 votes, the establishment of the reserve fund on the floor and a follow-up ballot. It is, again, Dan, faultless logic that it's a lot of extra work, it's a lot of extra time, it's a lot of extra strain, money toward to help like assuage this like really bumpy moment we're in where we don't actually have the details we all need to like move forward comfortably.
Can I take a moment?
Yeah, please, thank you.
I'm one who always looks for compromise. So we're going to be having a motion tonight to have this reserve fund, which is a non-funded fund, but it's a bucket, as you describe it, to have money come in, grants, donations, borrowing, whatever it takes. Which means we're going to have a discussion on the floor. It seems like somebody could, on the floor, say, we think you should fund 150 grand to get the engineering done so we can get these numbers everybody's asking about. Perhaps. We have a place to put the money. We'd have to authorize that. That would have to be I don't know if that would be enough money to require a bond, probably would. But what I feel is the pressure right now to get this done by the state, by the funders who are sitting on piles of money, by the people that have been displaced, by the community itself, where our population, as I said last time, hasn't grown in 40 years. And we wonder why our student population is going down. Well, it's because of all us old folks whose kids have moved away are still here. We need families here. We need families to come in. So this project and the Goddard project, which is also striving to get housing, but rental housing, different model, but we want to see them both succeed. I do anyway. So perhaps there's something we can do at town meeting that would help this. Go ahead.
Francis Rose, I knew when I got heated that you would not love that mode, but I think when we're in a housing crisis and people are suffering, sometimes manners and comportment are not as important as having a real conversation. And sometimes people have to have real conversations in different ways than you feel comfortable, and that's true for everyone. So while I'm sorry that it made you uncomfortable, it's not something that I'm gonna pledge never to do again. I wonder, I mean, it's obvious from everyone's that, you know, my hope to put this on March 4th is not going to be a motion that's gonna happen tonight. I wonder why we're putting the reserve fund on the floor vote. If we're looking for an indicator of the people's will to a Australian ballot vote that's gonna happen later, why aren't we putting this to an Australian ballot vote for this election, the reserve fund? Because wouldn't that be a better indicator of the kind of response we would get in an election?
Specific legal advice from the League of Cities and Towns was not, because we decide Plainfield's model of hybrid is to decide policy from the floor. The only things that we do on Australian ballot are those required by law.
Right. I'll just say,
This was there, and
I
this
know.
was their language in the program.
I just think that, you know, 80 to 100 people that show up for town meeting in person, it may not be the best representation of the whole town. The people that take 5 minutes to vote and then go to work or other things. So it's just a concern. I actually think this reserve fund will have no problem. I just think that trying to use town meeting floor as a gauge for interest from the whole town is kind of a flawed metric.
I just think it was their best advice as to.
No, and we have to create
Yeah.
this thing. I just think that I just don't think it's an actual. It doesn't actually tell us if the town is interested in us taking $2.5 million for this project. It'll tell us what 100 people in the town think about the project.
That's kind of always the way it is, though.
Well, I know, but yeah.
Unfortunately.
Anyway, the reserve fund makes total sense. We need to do it. It's, the other stuff.
And I think during that conversation about the reserve fund, there will be a lot of discussion. There's gonna be more data. There's gonna be,
Well,
some of that.
maybe, right? It's not actually germane to the town meeting. rest of the stuff.
People may have questions. I mean, that's the point of
The
the meeting.
loan and the costs and all that stuff wouldn't really be germane.
I don't think we'll get into that, but maybe, I don't know.
Can it go on an Australian ballot? It is a funding mechanism that you're talking about. It
This,
cannot go on an.
the fund is not a funding mechanism. It's a,
It's a place to put money, I got that.
yeah,
So it cannot go on an Australian ballot, is what you're saying?
That's what the league said.
that's what we heard.
Because
and
the
we-
way we do it.
And we can't use Australian ballot to get a sense of how the community is, which is what I thought we would be doing with this.
Well, that's what I.
But we are not allowed to do that. It's really for, financial and elections. Yeah,
We could change the way the town runs, which would take a warning. It would take a year to do that, but
yeah.
it's been proposed that we do everything by Australian ballot in this town, and the
Yeah,
town has voted that down, so.
yeah.
Peter, do you want to make your motion for the reserve?
I think
fund?
we need a motion for reserve fund and also to authorize the RFP for
Well,
the,
that'll be a different item, right?
it will be different. item.
I do make the motion for the reserve fund that I read before.
Did we get a second on that?
Second.
You already read it?
Shall the town establish a reserve fund to be called the Village Expansion Reserve Fund for the purpose of expanding the east side of the village by acquiring land and making municipal infrastructure improvements in accordance with 24 VSA subsection 2804.
And we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we will have that on the,
There was a comment in the room that maybe dissolved.
okay, we're gonna leave this.
Are we
And
doing the final articles next, or are we doing the Mill Street Bridge next?
I want to do the Mill Street Bridge next.
Does the select board have any appetite for any kind of bond commitment to make any kind of bond vote at any? Because our other alternative is to petition, which is our only option unless the select board moves. Which we will do. We will call a special election if the select board will not.
We can do with 110.
We can do with 110 signatures. We're
Mhm.
gonna need a lot more than that if we're gonna win them.
Mhm.
Well, yes. I would say yes. I am not opposed to bonding. I am not opposed to this project. I am not opposed to, frankly, the town investing in infrastructure to support development. I think that would attract a developer. I'd like to frankly explore the idea of us designing this project and saying to a developer, using our resources to develop that infrastructure, to say, we'd look to someone who is experienced in doing this to come in and build this project for us. And do that. I think that's a wonderful, I'd like to explore how that goes, okay? I really think, Arian, that we have sufficient legal questions to answer before putting it to a vote. Okay, that's my objection here.
Point of information?
Yeah.
I'm curious, the discussion seems to be between the town being the developer and the private person being the developer. I have not heard anything like we just said for the Mill Street Bridge about a project manager. In other words, project management is another likely thing. I mean, is it not even being considered that if the town chose to do this, then there would be a project manager who would act as responsibly and with as much expertise as a developer? Isn't that correct?
I think until the project exists formally in the world, it's not for us to talk about managing it. And then to your direct respond to you, Arian, yes, I want to see a bond measure vote at some point. And I think the complication I was trying to point to was that it's really hard for that to be timed with our town meeting.
And no appetite for a second bond vote as the compromise proposal.
No, I think what we're saying is that if we can't do the bond vote on March 4th, there has to be a second.
Yeah.
That was a different opportunity. Is that what you, maybe I'm not
I'm
following.
asking if the select board would commit to doing that tonight, because that saves us a certain amount of trouble. Not to say that we're opposed to it, but it does seem like it'd be much better to sort of go forward with a unified commitment rather than not.
I agree with that.
I'm not prepared to commit to a date for that. Okay, that's my issue. And I think, I mean, basically, the date that was proposed moves things out 11 days in terms of the legal warnings for that type of vote. And I don't think that's enough time to get our questions answered.
I mean, I would hope that we could warn it, and then if there were something, because I would hope that we could warn it and have the questions answered by the time we actually have to decide. That would be my hope.
Will we have the questions answered by the informational meeting before the town meeting?
I mean, I think as long as the purchase option is there, I don't doubt that Sandy and the engineer will have the drawings done and all the numbers crunched.
Okay, so that's a time we could.
Quite frankly, I don't want to warn it until we have the questions answered. Because if you warn it, then whether the questions get answered or not, the vote happens. I think that's irresponsible.
So, and just to be clear, the questions are all the bond questions. There's all sorts of bond lawyer questions.
Yes, yeah.
Is it legal for us to buy from Graham? Right.
Or is Graham willing to recuse himself
Well,
from this post for the?
Yeah, whatever, we have to figure that piece out.
And we've asked for guidance on that.
Actual cost of the sale, right?
Which is being negotiated.
And then the actual line by line numbers, which we already heard the timeline on that, which is gonna be by the end of February. Those are the questions. I just wanna make sure that like the folks who are working on this understand the questions, that they don't come back in a month and then there's a new set of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's another month, and I mean, we lose time so quickly. Especially a board that meets theoretically once every 2 weeks, so we do a lot more than that.
I think it makes a lot of sense to acknowledge the package that this is being couched within. The reserve measure is not a standalone feature, but it is. There is board support for this project.
Yeah, I think that's.
And therefore, to acknowledge that there is a full package here, and the other piece of that package is an intent and a commitment to hold a wider vote on the bond measure. And I can't speak to the specificity of date, because that's like not, I'm not carrying like.
Well, we have the school budget's up in March again, right?
School budget is to be voted on town meeting.
Yeah, so something like the school budget failing again, hopefully not. Could just mean that we would then maybe time something with something else, so there's more than one thing to vote on. Anyway, just to say that there's always complications and things going on.
You know, it would be if we articulated those questions, which I believe we just had, and I would think would be a really good sign for if the select board then had a resolution to say, once these things are answered, we will call a vote. Because that really says that you're serious about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just seeing that there's Betsy has a hand up on the screen.
Does that address that issue, or are you gonna address that issue?
I'm thinking that there's gonna be more questions all the time.
Yeah,
Honestly.
yeah.
You know, that's the way it works.
Yeah.
When you have a project. I mean, I'm kind of curious about the wetlands part of it, you know, so there are more questions already, I think, than there are just what you discussed.
We're never gonna have answers to every single question. We're
Well,
gonna have to
we
move
have
forward
to
at
have
some
answers.
point.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, but I mean, like,
But not before the vote.
but like, we will have answers as the project goes on, and the select board will continue to take things up if it goes forward. But there's never gonna be a point until
Well, we
the actual
voted on it.
project is
That was it.
completed
Reserve fund.
and all the
We need-
houses are
we
built
need to
and everything's
authorize
done, that all the questions are answered. Right? I mean, oh, well, this person actually wants to do this on this land. Is that, like, there's gonna be questions
Well, I was thinking more about whether it would stall the whole project, like the Act 250 and the
Yeah.
wetlands.
But we can't know that until we apply for it. And you
Right.
can't apply for it until you're doing the project.
Yeah,
I just think it's gonna be.
Betsy's been waiting up here a long time. Can we get your question?
Hi, I guess I'm mostly here to say that I think we have a big issue, to find out if this is, where this will be in the process of an Act 250 permit. And I think that Michael Zonner has brought that up very clearly. And he said, as far as I know, he brought that up for a long time ago. And if this is as a subdivision, which this will be, we're going to divide the land up and sell plots, or someone is, then we're legally, we're only allowed up to 10 lots. And we are not, we do not qualify for the unique situation, which I forget what it's called, but we are not a unique village entity. This will not be a unique village entity that meets the standard of Act 250's criteria, so that we would not be required to have an Act 250 permit. That he's saying that we would not qualify for that. So we really need to get all the legal advice we need before we present this to the public. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that that's exactly the way we're going right now, is to try to get these questions answered. We've had a lot of questions that we had a month ago that are now answered. So, this continuous process, I think we just have to wait for that. Eli, did you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to, we're asking you to warn a vote that would let us answer some of those questions. Is that correct? So, and then if that vote happened, yes, there would still be a public process where public input could happen on the select board, deciding whether or not to take a loan. We would be able to apply and get that question answered if Act 250 is gonna come into play on this project. And then the select board would be able to say, okay, Act 250 makes these 10 lots not viable. We're not going forward.
Yeah, you need to know, and you put a lot of volunteer effort into this, and we want to try to make sure that what is done is useful.
And like, it's all
Yeah.
complicated. So again, I work with Vermont Conservation Voters. One of the people I work with used to be Agency of Natural Resources, head legal counsel. He also worked on the Natural Resources Board. He does Act 250. He said that I asked him about the project. He said he thought that it would be exempt. And I know that Jake Hemrick at the state has said he thought it would be exempt. Somebody at the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission said they thought all of it is thinking, because the whole process with Act 250 is you actually have to put the application in, and then they make determinations, and then there's appeals. So we can't get to some of those steps until we get to some of those steps.
Yeah.
No one is gonna say, here's the magic path, and you're gonna hit yeses all the way through. Like, that's just not how this works.
Right.
In all of these state processes.
Yeah.
So I hear just a request that they actually have, like, if we're saying we're holding off until X, we have to define X. That's what they're saying.
Well,
And that's what we're saying, right? We have this, we like the compromise. We hold off, we have a second special election triggered by, and there was only 3 things, I think, in the thing that I saw. But if there's more, I think it was, it was the cost. I don't think they had the conflict of interest. Anyway, they just need to know what it is, and we need to be transparent.
So
Because if we just come back with more questions and more
It wasn't the
questions,
conflict of interest, it was the,
sale price,
basically, some kind of instrument taking the property off the market.
yeah, and then the vote for the reserve fund. Anyway, I just think we have to be clear with how, so that they know how to move forward, so the public knows the criteria we're using to decide when to call a special election.
well, we were asked if there should be a resolution to be ready to have a vote later. We don't have to decide on when, but we would have to decide that we would do that if there was enough information received. That's what I'm hearing. So,
Which specifically we lay out as the triggers.
yeah, yeah. So, I don't know, is there,
I can
So-
make a proposal,
okay,
propose that the town hold a special election to, with the bond measure on the ballot. Subsequent to the town meeting, once the following pieces of information are known. The negotiated price of the land. Help me out,
The line item budget,
the line item
Yep.
budget,
the passing of the first town vote, which is the
the
reserve
passing of
fund.
the reserve.
Which is the fund,
Reserve fund
yeah.
from the floor of the town meeting.
And then, and the ethics question,
The legalities.
the legalities of the ethics and the bond language. That
Yeah.
Peter had a number of sub points.
and I have to think there's a way around that ethics question. There's a couple ways, but we've got to work, it's gonna take some time to work through that. But we have another month before town meeting.
Totally.
So you're making a motion?
I'm
Wait,
gonna
what was
make
the first of the criteria? Sorry,
It
The
was
price of the land.
the price of
the
the
price
land.
of the land. Which is also would be in the line item, but, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
It's actually a negotiated, it's not so much the price, it's actually
It's an option.
securing it, getting the option. Yeah.
Securing the price, the select board through the attorney that is willing, was signaled his support to represent us. To
Yes.
negotiate a fixed price on the land.
Yes.
going forward.
With an agreement that says that it be held for this project.
yeah, I mean, the conflict of interest issue is like, can we even negotiate with this person? You know, so,
Yeah,
I
and they
mean,
may- and they may say-
Eli's own words were, it's a thorny situation, quote unquote.
Yeah,
Totally.
so we just want to make sure it's right, because we don't want something to come back on us later.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye. No opposed, okay. So we have a resolution for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
All right,
you.
we-
Think on-
One more thing
Mill Street Bridge,
what's that?
we're moving on to Mill Street Bridge.
Mill Street Bridge, please, I would like to get this done. We have to authorize the RFP. Did you have the language there? I think so.
By the way, I can add as a coda that.
No, it just says authorized RFP. I don't have a,
I can add it as a coda that just what you just did will also help us secure the potential grant.
Yeah,
um,
well, we want to authorize the RFP. I didn't write it.
God, if you give us a minute or three, I think Mike Zonner sent us, here we go,
There is language. yeah.
January 28th.
I'll look up. his name.
While we figure this out, Charlie, did you want to say something?
All right, here's contact person Carl Bissix, request for proposal, municipal project management at the ready consulting services. Da, 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 da.
So we're-
Response format, so. I think the motion would be to issue the request for proposal. As per the municipal project management at the ready consultant services. As per Mike Zonner's email of January 28th.
Right. Okay. Second for that?
Second.
On, what was the date? January 28th?
Yes.
Yes. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's good to get done. I think that's,
Well, we gotta do the official articles, right?
Yes.
yes, where are we here? Yeah.
All right, so this is the warning, meeting with Carol Dawes this morning.
Yeah.
This is the format that will get posted, warning for town meeting. Articles 1 and this basically says the meeting is the 4th day of March at 10 o'clock in the forenoon to transact the following business by Australian and voted by Australian ballot. Voting booth polls are open from 9 AM to 7 PM. The meeting, floor meeting is at 10. Articles 1 and 2 will be voted by Australian ballot. Those are the officers for the coming year and the zoning that we did earlier. And I think we have filled in all of the numbers from the budgets that we adopted, water and wastewater, and Josh today gave us the tax dates. Oh, good, for those articles, which is August 13th, November 19th, and February 11th. And the village expansion language is in here.
Okay.
It's Article 13 with the other reserve funds. And so we need to,
Peter, would you?
I will
you need a
move.
Motion this?
Yes, we do. You want to move it?
No, you can, I,
Right.
you know.
I move that we,
We have a, Sandy, did you want to say something?
You're muted.
You're muted.
Yep,
Yeah.
me,
Is it
this
possible that we have a Zoom component to town meeting? So that what I'm concerned about is that there are going to be a lot of questions about the reappraisal. And if I can at least attend by Zoom, I could answer questions.
Got to be determined by the Secretary of State. There are some changing Zoom rules about how.
Yeah.
No one's gonna be able to hear what you're saying. Likely.
Okay, I mean, I don't want to vote or anything. I just want to be able to answer questions if they come up about the reappraisal.
We'll see about that. I think it would be a useful thing for people.
We're not sure if the Secretary of State allows that under current rules or not.
Okay,
people cannot vote by Zoom.
Yeah.
I don't want to vote.
Yeah, I don't know whether they can.
They can watch a one-way meeting, which is what we did 2 years ago.
I'll try and get an answer on that, Sandy.
Okay.
Okay, what else?
All right, so I move these articles, there's 19 articles, for that, this is our warning, and
Yep,
we'll need a second, and then we need to sign these and get them posted.
okay, I'll second that. All those in favor of these items, say aye.
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 All right.
And all of us saying this, and this is gonna go into our booklet. Correct?
Well, this is what gets posted, but the
Oh,
articles,
okay.
the articles do get reposted in the booklet itself, yes.
Okay. We just have
I
one.
just had extra copies.
Oh,
We just need one form. of
Yeah,
copy.
okay.
So, you want one for your records?
No.
You'll get one.
Do we all have to find them?
At least 3 of them.
Oh, I know. Well, I just looking for, if there's line for each. I didn't know if we had to track down Patty or.
I can try and find her and get her in the morning. So I'm meeting with Kristen at 10 in the morning
Okay,
because we also have to, now we can print the final ballot.
yes,
And we have different templates for that. And then Carol worked on that, and then that'll also get posted. So
Did I hear town meeting starts at 10 a.m. on the?
10 a.m.,
the
yes,
floor meeting at 10, the polls open at 9.
and 9.
Thank
yeah.
you.
And they'll be here, in this building.
Yeah.
Okay, any motion to adjourn?
I think you just have to announce the next meeting. Which would
Thank
be
you.
February 10th.
Our next select board meeting is February 10th at 6 p.m.
Motion to adjourn at 8:15.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.